Welcome back, everybody, to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I am Jesse Collings, joined as always with my colleague Jason Ounpraseuth. Jason, how are you doing on this November week? This November Friday, the last Friday before Black Friday and Thanksgiving, the holiday season. Christmas music will be everywhere in a week from now.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some people on Twitter, they've already got the Christmas trees up, and so it's just I mean, Thanksgiving is kind of a day off for most people. And Black Friday, thankfully, with the magic of technology, companies are just putting out early Black Friday deals anyway online. So there's no reason to just wait on Friday exactly. So it's just the magic of technology.
I think Black Friday really peaked like 10 years ago as a concept of but now everything's so advanced with online shopping and the businesses are up to date. You can't really get the big deals, but you can't discount the fun of going into a store and just seeing deals everywhere. There's something about the physical atmosphere of going into a Target and just seeing like all this cheap stuff and motivating you to buy it. Not to go on a Voices of Wrestling flagship like 30-minute preamble before we talk about the news, but my Black Friday shopping strategy. I'm hesitant to almost share it because it's so brilliant. I live in Massachusetts. I go to Maine for Thanksgiving because my grandmother lives there. And to get from Massachusetts to Maine, you have to drive through New Hampshire, of course.
Yep.
I'm coming back from Thanksgiving dinner, New Hampshire opens its Black Friday shopping on Thanksgiving Eve. Like they open, like their Black Friday deals start at like 4:00 on Thanksgiving Eve. So on my way back, I stop at the Greenland, New Hampshire Target. And that's when I do all my Black Friday shopping. You get all the deals. No one's picked over the place because people haven't even started thinking about Black Friday. You go right in, you can just clean out whatever you need. You need a new TV, you need a new iPad. I bought my Nintendo Switch a few years ago on it. And of course, in New Hampshire, I'm sure you're well aware, Jason, there's no sales tax. So you're even getting a better deal off of it than regular Black Friday deals. So it's the ultimate way to do Black Friday shopping. I'll never be one of those people that's like sleeping outside of Best Buy on that night. But especially this year, I highly recommend if you are in a state that does this Black Friday shopping starts earlier. Because I think in Massachusetts, there's a straight up law that says you can't do the Black Friday deals until Friday.
Yep.
I recommend that. Strategy is to go Thanksgiving Eve. Because honestly, what are you doing on Thanksgiving night? Like, I think you eat dinner at 2:00 in the afternoon for some reason. And then, or at least my family does. And then, the football game sucks. Go out there and do your Black Friday shopping. You get a lot of your Christmas shopping done before like the Christmas season has even really started. It's great. It's my tip of the week here. Maybe I'll start that as a weekly trend. I give it a life tip, but probably not because that's one of my few life tips that I feel like actually has value.
Yeah, if you're a gambling degenerate, you're basically just sweating your lineups. You're on DraftKings for football. That's all you're doing on Thanksgiving.
And there's only 4 teams you can pick. Or actually, no, because there's a night game now. So there's 6 teams you could pick from if you're playing daily fantasy. But anyway, Thanksgiving aside, I want to talk about something, a very new kind of thing that has been discussed a lot, especially since Full Gear, especially since Hangman Adam Page won the AEW World Championship. And that is booking a world champion. And we're going to discuss a lot about AEW's, world title scene, but we can also talk about, Roman Reigns and Big E, the nonsense that's happening on New Japan, where they have like 4 world champions or in theory are presented as 4 world champions at the same time. It's very confusing. But there's a lot, I think, that can be discussed about world championships. And we'll start with Hangman Page. And we'll start with AEW because have you noticed this, Jason, that the AEW fan base is a very worrisome fan base? They've got a lot of fears. They've got a lot of anxiety. They're very concerned about something happening in AEW that kind of sinks the ship. Have you noticed that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think it maybe just be a thing of how things are too good to be true, which is in fairness, it is a kind of a fair argument. Like things have gone really well for AEW in these past 2 years. Even Tony Khan has admitted that AEW has exceeded his expectations for when he bought the company or just formed the company in general. So it makes a lot of sense that like, hey, something bad is going to happen. You know, CM Punk is going to throw like a hissy fit backstage, and that's going to ruin the whole locker room morale. That's like I've seen some of that in there. You know, obviously other things backstage, just mostly just backstage stuff. Someone's going to ruin this a cohesive family atmosphere, and that's going to ruin the whole company. That's what I've seen a lot from the AEW fan base.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's too good to be true. It's afraid that we're going to go back into the dark ages where there was no AEW. And like now that Ring of Honor has kind of gone belly up and Impact's failing to make a dent, and New Japan in America is off to has been in decline. We're going to go back to some dark ages where we literally only have WWE as far as like a major promotion, and people are concerned about that. So there's a lot of anxiety and angst about something that's going to go wrong. And I think that leads us to the Hangman Page kind of discussion, because I've heard this not even like real like takes on what is happening, what is going on now that is a problem, more just all this anxiety about what potentially could be a problem. And that's Hangman Page as AEW World Champion. Is Hangman Adam Page one of those guys who's better off chasing the title than winning the title and holding on to the title and having a long reign, which is very valid and could very well be true, and it wouldn't necessarily be a problem if that does end up being the case, because there are plenty of people throughout wrestling history that have been great at chasing the title and less great, as champion, or never even really tried to win the championship or hold on to the championship for a long time. I think Dusty Rhodes is a great example. He has 3 world title reigns. I think they're like combined under 100 days, as NWA world champion. And that was because he was perfect at chasing the title and trying to, win the Dusty finish is the classic. Dusty Rhodes wins the title, except he actually doesn't win the title because of some technicality. He was always better as the chaser. And Page, because the story of him and his rise has solely been, focused on him actually winning the AEW World Heavyweight Championship, it's logical to think that he has climaxed at winning the championship. And now that he's done that, it can only be downhill from here, because he has already achieved the ultimate goal for what his story was. But obviously, time doesn't stop. AEW is not going to close up shop because Hangman Page won the title. Everything needs to move forward, and AEW has to book Hangman Page as the babyface champion. And can they maintain his momentum as champion? Can they take him up a level as champion? I think that would probably be the ultimate goal, would be that this is just the beginning of his, superstardom. But realistically, is he one of those people that is better off chasing the title than being champion for a year? Because AEW's had long champions. Jericho was a long reigning champion. Moxley almost held it for almost a year. Omega held it for almost a year. So AEW has consistently been, we want our people to have long title reigns, especially when it comes to the world championship. But is Hangman Page going to be a different type of champion? Is that going to benefit him if he loses the title and is chasing it again? What are kind of your aspirations or ideas for Hangman Page being the champion? And do you share any of the concerns that I kind of laid out, that maybe he isn't going to be this dominant world champion that's like, Bruno Sammartino holding onto the title for 7 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do share a little bit, not like the anxiety ridden comments that are out there, but I do think there's a little bit of concern that Page could be just guy who's better at chasing the title. Like this story with Hangman Page you could argue is a 2-year long story, starting from All Out 2019 when he failed to win the title from Jericho, and then from there, he's just been rebuilding himself. Obviously the tag team Kenny Omega, and then just all the whole story behind that there, and they've taken this whole long time to build this story to finally when he wins the title, and then you know, the question always is what happens next. You know, if WWE wants to compare themselves to Marvel, obviously with Marvel movies, like, you know, you face Thanos in the Avengers, what's next after that? Like, how do you top that? And it could be similar with Hangman Page, right? Like, how do you top this epic match that got 5.5 stars today, from Dave Meltzer with Kenny Omega at Full Gear? Like, how do you top that? And you have Bryan Danielson. He's the number one contender. He sort of made his claim to the title this past week. I don't think the match has been confirmed for anything just yet. But you know, logic does bring out for a lot of people that Bryan Danielson, you can make a lot of money with him as AEW champion. You know, Bryan Danielson is on this new renaissance for himself in his career, where people are realizing that he is, you know, one of the best in the world after toiling for so long in WWE. And so people are presuming that he could be the next champion. But like you said before, you know, AEW prides themselves on having long championships. You know, Jericho has the shortest reign out of the 3 champions, but it's 180 days. Like, that's a pretty decently long reign, 180. And with Hangman Page, like, you presume he gets that title for a long time, but you never really know. I mean, ideally, he would, you know, continue to overcome these challenges, you know, like a Bryan Danielson, you know, that could be his story there. He overcomes these bigger names than what he is, and maybe he could emerge into that next tier of that Kenny Omega, I guess, you know, all these other, you know, top tier talents in AEW. That could be the ideal goal for AEW for what they want to see from Adam Page. But, you know, you never know. I mean, I always recall back from the guys like Cody Rhodes and the other EVPs, where they always talk about how AEW is an alternative, and they always want to do something different than what fans are expecting. And could this be the case with their world title reigns? Maybe they just want to do something different with Adam Page as opposed to the other title reigns. Yeah, I think it's very important to point out that with the last 2 champions, with Omega and Moxley, for the most of their reigns, I guess maybe minus Omega, it's been through the pandemic without an actual crowd. And so I think the benefit of a crowd can help Page out a lot more, where the fans, you know, there isn't really indication from the live crowd that they're waiting on him anytime soon. And with AEW's booking, I don't think they'll run into a WWE thing where, like, the fans are just tired of their champions, which I'm sure we'll get to later on when we talk about WWE. But for AEW, there's no indication that the fans are tired of Hangman Page yet. You know, obviously they have BTE, where, you know, good amount of the live crowd are watching that because Dark Order is still really popular, for, you know, one of the reasons being that because they are this lovable bunch of guys. And so I think that can help out Page for a little bit, maybe they call it a honeymoon period for maybe 2 or 3 months until Revolution comes in.
Yeah, I think the strength of Hangman Page is, for starters, like as you mentioned, he's over enough to be a champion. There's no real risk putting the championship on him, in the sense that we think this guy is going to flop as champion, or we need this guy to be really big as a champion. There's not that kind of risk in there. Yes, they've dedicated a lot of resources and time to getting him over, and they're counting on him to be kind of this younger, original AEW star, but it's not like the business hinges on his success and failure. And he's certainly popular enough to get the title. It's not like we're like, I don't know if he can cut it as champion. I don't know if he can cut it like popularity wise. He's going to be coming out here and these guys are going to be like, there was real promotion that, oh, can we really put Hangman and Danielson together? Because Danielson's so beloved by the crowd and we don't want him to overshadow Page if the fans start cheering for Danielson instead of Page. And I think that's clear just from their one interaction. That's not going to happen. And part of that is because Danielson's very smart, and the way he's presented himself on Wednesday was very smart as far as getting people to sympathize with Hangman. Even if they were in danger of cheering for him over Hangman, which I don't really think was the case, that's not going to happen anyway. And as you mentioned, as far as like a strong title reign, the big thing looking at Page is that he has a lot of fresh or interesting challengers lined up for him. Danielson is a great first person I really enjoy this feud, even though we've only seen literally one day of it, because it's being set up where Danielson is like, I'm Bryan Danielson. I'm the master wrestler. I've done all of these things. I main evented WrestleMania. I'm undefeated in AEW. I think you're soft, and I don't think you're a good world champion, and I'm going to take that title from you. And Page is going to come out, and he's going to have to prove himself to Danielson. And I think that's a really good first defense for him, which is he's facing this guy who has immense credibility, and you can tweak him in the right way, basically by saying, you're not cut out for this. I'm taking the title from you. And when Page wins, which I'm very certain Page is going to win this feud, makes a lot of sense as far as further establishing Page, not just as this guy who was involved in this long story with Kenny Omega, but this guy who is the babyface that people can believe in and can see continue to overcome obstacles. And that's just one feud you can do. You can have Jericho come back. To me, that is another feud that is totally in the cards as far as, they had the history at All Out, the first All Out, where Jericho beat Page for the title. I think that's an easy story to tell. CM Punk versus Page. What a match, right? That could do that if you wanted to. No, I don't know what the status of Jon Moxley is, but if Page is going to be holding the title for a long time, it's possible that Moxley comes back in 2022. There's another hot program you can do. In fact, you could reason that Danielson is kind of currently in the position that Moxley maybe was penciled in for before he left to go to rehab. And that's not even getting into like your next generation of feuds, like Page versus MJF. Page could defend the title against Darby Allin. They're not beholden to just heel and babyface dynamic, which I think is really important. And I think there's just a lot you could do with Page. It's not like they threw all these resources at him and he beat every top guy and then he won the title. He really didn't beat or feud with any of the tippy top guys, outside of Omega before he won the championship. And now he has like all of these things that you have in the chamber ready to go when you need to establish them.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a ton of great feuds. And I think it's pretty interesting to have that underdog champion mentality there, because like you mentioned a ton of big names like Bryan Danielson, Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley potentially. Like there's a lot there to really paint Hangman as like someone who has to prove himself against these bigger names to reach that top echelon of top champions. And I think it seems logical that MJF could be the guy to take the title off Page eventually. But obviously we're thinking like maybe potentially a long way down the road. But yeah, there's a lot of good matchups for Page to deal with. It's kind of interesting how like John Silver's been getting a lot of singles matches as of late. I don't know if they're going to have any type of tension there, whether that's a good idea or not. That's maybe another subject, but maybe building up some of these Dark Order guys for Page to take on, perhaps. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting routes you can go Page as champion. Most of which is like, this idea, like you said, Bryan Danielson, he has to prove that he is not, that he is up to the challenge for Bryan Danielson to take on and to really prove himself as an actual good wrestler, not just, a man of the people type.
The journey isn't over for Page establishing himself as a top star, right? You did have the big climactic thing where he beats Kenny Omega and he wins the world championship, which really does serve as the definitive moment of establishing yourself as a top star. But there's still plenty more to go through, especially because he doesn't come in with Bryan Danielson has decades of credibility as a top guy. CM Punk, Chris Jericho, decades of credibility. Moxley, Omega, these are all guys who came into AEW with instant credibility, instant main event status. Page is still working his way, even though great, he won the title. He's still working his way into establishing himself in that class. And I think when he has the title is now you look at him and you say, okay, who can we give him that can further establish his credibility? Because I think this sometimes becomes a problem in WWE where they put the world title on somebody and then they have them feud with like mid-card people and not like top guys. I'll use Kofi Kingston as an example. Like Kofi Kingston wins the world title in this great moment at WrestleMania. And his first feud is with Dolph Ziggler. And it's like, Kofi's this guy who was a mid-carder for 10 years, and now he's the world champion. And you got to convince fans that he's not just a mid-carder anymore. He's a world champion. And then his first feud is with a guy who's also was a mid-carder for a long time and has a very established ceiling within WWE. And it kind of brings him down a level. Like, oh, this is what we're getting out of our world championship now is mid-card matches. They needed Kofi to have, bigger matches against more established talent now. WWE maybe doesn't have that many people at their disposal that they wanted Kofi Kingston to beat, as opposed to AEW, where I feel like they have no qualms with putting Page over anybody on their roster. And that's key as far as continuing that journey of Adam Page is our top star by having him establish himself as champion, beating these other top stars.
Yeah, it's also a product of AEW's booking, where they have a large roster, and so WWE obviously has a large roster too. But for seemingly WWE, they have to put on the same people on every week, whereas AEW, some guys don't have to be on every week. Even Kenny Omega, obviously he's injured, but still, even if he wasn't injured, you didn't have to have him on the next Dynamite after. He could just be off for a couple weeks until he wants to come back. But obviously he's injured now, but still it plays into a good story for the rematch later on. He could be out for a couple months. Maybe the rematch is at Revolution, maybe Page and Omega too. That's something they can play with. But yeah, for AEW, one loss isn't going to harm your career. I know some people are kind of on Darby Allin, how he's taken 2 losses in a row, but still, you could heat up Darby Allin any time. Just the way these characters have been booked and have been presented, a guy like Darby Allin can eat a loss and, he can always come back because that's his character. Brian Danielson, he can eat a loss to Adam Page and then just run through the whole entire roster again if they wanted to. These guys, one loss does not kill them as much as for WWE, where, they're just seemingly afraid to have anybody lose, especially if a guy like Roman Reigns, they're very afraid to have Roman lose. And, they'll just, put that at the expense of other talents that they should be pushing.
Yeah, here's the thing with the Danielson aspect of it. People were referring to Danielson as a heel turn, and I don't really see that as much as he's playing a heel for this feud, because you know what can happen? The way it's been constructed so far, if Page beats Danielson, Danielson can shake Page's hand and say, "You proved yourself to me," and then Danielson's a babyface again. And then Page and Danielson can tag against Adam Cole and Bobby Fish or whatever. If Adam Cole were to be Page's next challenger, which I could see as a potential possibility, you can do that kind of thing. And it's not necessarily locking yourself into, oh, Danielson's a big heel now, he's got to do all these heel things. Maybe moving on from AEW and kind of talking about WWE, I think something I saw, this is breaking news because I saw this 15 minutes before this started, but I was looking on social media and I was looking at Big E's comments. It was a story on Big E, and the headline was Big E on who he thinks is on top of the wrestling industry right now. Jason, who do you think Big E said was on top of the wrestling industry right now?
I'm gonna guess not himself, but Roman Reigns.
No, yes, he said not himself. He said the bloodline is on top of the industry, and I'm like, dude, you are the WWE champion, all right, and you're giving a worked response anyway, and you're wrestling this guy in 2 days, and he says, basically. He says, I think Roman Reigns and the bloodline, I think those guys, what they've been able to do, those guys are on top right now. And I want to get to that level. And I'm going to, I have to, it encourages me to get my game up and step up. And I'm like, if you're the world champion, you should not be saying that some other person is not on your level. And you have to work to get to their level. And that kind of goes into a lot of WWE's aspects in the sense that they have 2 world champions. And they're rarely ever seen as equals. It's always one belt is more important than the other belt. And it has, varied back and forth. It usually depends on which belt is on the A show and which belt is on the B show. And since that, situation is kind of flipped, where now SmackDown's the A show and Raw is the B show, Big E is out here. And and I think it's a legitimate problem with Big E because the Raw viewership for him as champion has not been good. And I know everyone likes Big E. I like Big E. Everyone wants him to see him do well. The interest hasn't really, I mean, it's a problem that extends far beyond Big E, but we've seen people kind of be put into main event spots, and when the ratings are bad, they get taken out of those main event spots before. And he does in WWE, if you were like, who is the top person in WWE, you'd say Roman Reigns, because he's booked as such, and every talent, including Big E, are told put over Roman all the time in the press, which is what happened here. And to me, it's like, you have a guy who has been, again, a mid-carder for 10 years. Now he's the world champion. And he's giving an interview and he's saying, I'm not on the level of this guy who's the established world champion, and I need to get to that level. And I was like, where is your confidence, Big E? Where is your positivity? Where is you need to be out here and you need to be saying, I'm the best in the industry. Nobody else is at my level. I have the WWE championship. I'm the face of Raw. I'm the face of the longest running episodic television, weekly episodic television show in history. I'm the top guy. Everyone else needs to get to my level. Roman Reigns needs to get to my level. Maybe he needs to get to my level if he wants to beat me at Survivor Series. Like, it just seems like a weird dynamic having those two world championships and having one be so inferior to the other, but still expect people to view the person who's holding the secondary world title as also a top guy. It just seems, it's always been such a weird dynamic having these two world titles. And I think with Big E, there's some things going on there that aren't clicking with me.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like you said, it's a worked response. You're supposed to, play up your character, say, I'm the best. I'm better than Roman Reigns. Who I don't care if Roman Reigns is the cousin of The Rock. Like, I'm better than him because X, Y, and Z. Like, that's what you're supposed to say. Especially when you want, WWE fans are always like the casual fans. You want the casual fans to know about you. Like, that's what you're supposed to say. Like for WWE fans, sure, like they'll understand that Big E is the underdog in this match, but for the casual fan, quote unquote, that they don't know that. Like, they probably don't even know who you are. Maybe some people do. He's been doing a lot of these big radio spots and these other big media appearances, but still, like, most people probably know Roman Reigns more than Big E because Roman Reigns is always the one giving out these worked responses saying AEW is, beginner's luck, all that kind of stuff. Oh, CM Punk, he's a has-been, he's whatever, all that stuff. And maybe he thinks that, but we all understand it's mostly just the work that he's presenting himself as the better person, because that's what he's supposed to do as the champion, even if you're whether a heel or a babyface, even like the babyface champions, the UFC, all the good guys that people like, they're the ones that are always putting themselves over because that's what he's supposed to do as a champion. And yeah, for Big E, his feuds, like, it's been fine so far with his title reign, his crown jewel match. It was fun, but still, like, it didn't really move the needle for me. Obviously, Monday Night Football is always a big competition, but still, like, you can't always use that as an excuse. We've talked about this before. Like, you just have to overcome that. You have to do something creative behind that, especially with Big E, who this is probably his one chance at the championship. Like, I doubt anyone will think that he'll get another crack at it unless they do just go big, like a quick flip-flop kind of thing. Like, it's highly doubtful that if he loses the title next year, he'll get it again in the next 5 years, right? Like, this is one chance to really prove that Big E is in that top echelon of WWE champions, or just in the top of the company itself. But you rarely get that feeling from the way he's booked so far.
Yeah, and that's just part of it, is taking these guys who are mid-carders. And it goes, with Big E, it goes back to how he won the title, which is he cashes in, which is kind of like a move pretty much designed for like a BS heel champion heel person to do, right? Is to steal the title after someone had a wrestling match or someone got laid out by somebody and they come in and they steal a championship. It's kind of a heelish move. It's not necessarily the best way to get someone over as a babyface. And I think you take his career, again, established as a mid-carder for a long time. It wasn't like he was in the mid-card with this eye on him always being elevated to superstar status. He was in the mid-card forever. And then he ended up getting the world title. And it just puts you kind of behind the eight ball as far as establishing yourself as a legitimate top star. And then you have these things where, look, the reality is what Big E said is the reality. The reality is, like you said, Roman Reigns is a bigger star than Big E. He's more recognized than Big E because he's presented as such. Big E's goal should be to present himself at the same level, not acknowledging that this guy is at a higher level. It's a work. And you're trying to get people excited for the match. And it would be it would make much bigger headlines if Big E's like, Roman's not on my level. Like, that's just we work in wrestling news a little bit. Like, we know what would get more traction. I think that would get more traction as like a headline than, him just acknowledging that Roman's a top star than him. And it was a chance to elevate yourself and to put yourself over. And instead it's like, Roman's the top guy. And it's because WWE is so obsessed with establishing Roman as this star without any, parallel, that anytime you give an interview, you got to put over Roman, no matter if you're talking, even if it's a golden opportunity to put over yourself. But that's, I don't want to blow this interview out of proportion because it was just one interview, but it does kind of touch on a general theme of when it comes to establishing the world championship. And on the flip side, I found Roman's title reign as personally ponderous in the sense that I'm not particularly entertained by it, but I do really like that they have so firmly tied his status as the top star to the world championship. And this isn't something that WWE has historically always done. It really seems like the Universal Championship, which before Roman got it was often viewed as kind of a joke, like championship with a bad design. But his character, which is at the head of the table, the dominant force, the top of the industry, is so closely tied into him holding the world title that I really do think it has helped elevate the world title to a new level. And it helps set the storyline where if you want to dethrone Roman Reigns and if you want his spots, which all of these guys should be aspiring to do, you have to beat him for the world title. It's directly connected with his personality and this current character that he has. And I think that's really important to overall establishing the world title as the most critically important thing in your company.
Yeah, I think the Roman character, I think in a vacuum, if you just look at the character itself and the way the world title is booked, it's really good. However, like in the atmosphere of the show itself, it really isn't. Like you said before, everyone should aspire to defeat Roman Reigns. However, in the booking, there really isn't really any strong contenders other than, mythical people who we don't know will actually be on in WWE, like The Rock. Like The Rock seems to, they really want this match to happen. We have no idea if it actually will. The Rock has been pretty pessimistic on it, as he should be, because like that guy's schedule is changing all the time. He's got like a DC movie kind of coming out like next year in 2 years or whatever. Like who knows? That movie's probably gonna do really well. That's gonna be, we'll garner more sequels. He's probably gonna be in more other DC properties as well, assuming that movie does really well. And so who knows what his schedule is going to look like in 2 years. And so, but that clearly is a match that everyone wants. It's something that Roman Reigns has been asked about and talked about a bunch as well. Even Jimmy Fallon has asked him about that. And so that's how big this match is. But again, we have no idea if this match is going to happen. Like this match could easily just not happen. And we've just been building up to this match that for no reason. And then we just killed a bunch of other current wrestlers just for that.
Well, yeah, I agree that I think the gambling around hoping that The Rock is available, maybe he's available in 2023, does seem like you're going to sacrifice years and years worth of entertainment value for one match that I'm sure will do big business and whatever. But the problem, and this kind of makes sense, is that WWE doesn't have anyone that they seemingly are building up to beat Roman and have like actually be important. Roman's big feuds are John Cena, Brock Lesnar, and The Rock. Like Brock Lesnar beats Roman Reigns, it makes sense via storyline that Brock Lesnar would be the person who takes the title from Roman Reigns, but you're not establishing anyone new, and you've done such a good job establishing Roman Reigns that someone beating him for the title, following an organic build would be a really big deal in the sense of helping establish that person as a top star. Because unlike Big E cashing in the Money in the Bank and stealing the championship, this would come across as like a very momentous kind of big win that you really would be putting the stamp of approval on somebody. I just don't know who that would be on the roster, which is another problem. But that kind of gets away from like the crux of the issue of WWE, which is the world title and the kind of situation that they have going on there. Do you think that they would be better? I know they have the brand split, but do you think they'd be better off with one world title and just kind of having them appear on both shows? Or does that just seem infeasible because they'd have to be feuding with different people and you don't think WWE could pull that off?
I think it is infeasible just in the whole politics of the networks. Like obviously we have that to deal with as well, the brand split. Like obviously, if you take out obviously like Fox and NBCU, they would want the champion to be on every show all the time. And I don't know if that could work with WWE's booking to have the champion just that overexposed like all the time to many different people. But yeah, I think it would definitely help out the US Intercontinental titles to have one world champion to make those titles more important. But again, like WWE, just the way they book their titles, like those mid-card titles are just kind of irrelevant for the most parts. They'll just switch those around. There's no really importance to those titles at all. But yeah, I think just for simplicity's sake, I think it would benefit them to have one world championship and just to have, especially like, quite frankly, just like, this week, they cut more people from their roster and they keep doing these cuts. And so it just seems like they want a very tight-knit roster. From the outside looking in, that's just what it seems like. And so just to have one world championship would really help out, condense more challengers. You have less guys, just mid-carders, just prop up for a world championship for a B pay-per-view. I think you would have less of that and just more condensed line of challengers coming in for that one world championship.
Yeah, and I think it's like the opposite, like you said, the opposite of AEW situation, where AEW has this line of fresh matchups and challenges for the world title, which is really important to establishing someone as champion, as we discussed with Hangman Page. And WWE just doesn't have that. And even when you look at the SmackDown side, it's weak. When it comes to people with real credibility. They have Drew McIntyre, could probably squeeze a couple of pay-per-view matches out of McIntyre and Reigns. But as long as the Lesnar thing is kind of hanging over things, you don't think that Roman's going to lose any of those matches, which I think has been a problem with Roman's reign, is that he's just wrestled people that you knew weren't going to beat him. Like you knew Finn Balor wasn't going to beat him. You knew that Kevin Owens wasn't going to beat him. You knew that these people working with him just didn't have a shot because they weren't established top talent, and they weren't established as like names that people you would conceivably be able to think would beat Roman Reigns, because nobody is established at that level. The only people at that level are people with credibility from other eras like Brock Lesnar and John Cena. And, and even in Cena, like you knew Cena wasn't going to beat him at SummerSlam. Like I was talking with somebody on over the weekend, and they were saying that like, oh, I didn't know who was going to win at Crown Jewel. I thought that was like a total toss up. And I was like, Crown Jewel happened the exact way I thought, which is Heyman screws over somebody and we don't know who he screwed over. But that just seems to be a broader issue. And even on Raw, like I don't like I guess Big E, you have Kevin Owens and you have Seth Rollins, who you can conceivably beat Big E, but that says more about how Big E has been established than like the credibility of those challengers, right? Big E has been established as a relatively weak champion in the sense that now it feels like he can, anyone could conceivably beat him, as opposed to being put on this, this high level where only a very top star peaking at the right time could conceivably beat him. And that's just two totally different dynamics. And it really does make the WWE Championship feel like a mid-card title.
Yeah, it makes Big E look like a transitional champion, which obviously with the way he won the title, that Money in the Bank winners aren't transitional champions for the most part. If you are, they basically just give it up on you as a champion. But yeah, like Big E, he's not presented as a dominant world champion, which is why, like you said, Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens can conceivably win the title from Big E. And, especially the way NXT is now, like, it's clearly all developmental. Like Braun Breaker probably isn't going to come up anytime soon. I mean, maybe he could just because Vince feels like pushing that guy, but still, that's not a very organic sort of build. And so they're just kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place where a lot of their guys now have been overexposed to the point where, it's very hard to be a credible, believable contender for the world title, especially on the SmackDown side. And, with Raw, They're kind of just, floating about in back and forth. There really isn't a lot of consistency in terms of the champion and also the challengers as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I don't know what like with Braun Breaker, like I actually am like, and I wrote about this for Wrestling Inc. Like, I think like Breaker, like they should just bring him up soon and push him on the main roster, because they're so devoid of talents that people actually believe in, that I think if you brought someone up as like a super rookie and gave them this huge push, even if they fundamentally weren't ready for it, I think they could have the potential to get over, just because I feel like people really desperately want to believe in something new for WWE. But at this rate, I think like there's as big of a likelihood as Braun Breaker gets released than if he, gets to the main event. I mean, you could say the same thing about Hit Row, like people being excited about Hit Row, mainly just because they were something different than you're normally seen, and they last like they're on SmackDown like twice and then they're released. And that's a different dynamic as far as like establishing people getting over. But it really is interesting, the differences in the two titles and how it's always been like that. And it's always been like whoever was on Raw was the real champion, and SmackDown was like this B champion, and it was like the title that Edge could hold for a bunch of times, because Edge was very much kind of like the B level star behind John Cena or behind Triple H, or in that it was the championship that Rey Mysterio got to have. And nothing against any of the talent I mentioned there, but it was always made clear that they weren't the real world champion, just like how it's clear now that Big E isn't like the real world champion and not the top guy, and to the point that he can't even say in that kayfabe interview that he is the top guy. It's just I don't know, like, and they've been doing it for so long, and people said they didn't like the Undisputed Championship, and I get that, but I do wish that they just had one champion. I wish the brand split was over, basically, and they could just do stuff on it seemed like a lot more stuff would, I think, make sense. We wouldn't have to deal with the Survivor Series where they fight for brand supremacy.
I totally forgot of Survivor Series was this week until a couple of days ago. But yeah, like, I mean, the brand split being over, I think maybe that's a tougher sell, especially for the networks. But like one championship would definitely help benefit a lot, especially like, even like recently, like was it 7-8 years ago when like John Cena and Randy Orton unified the titles, and then obviously Danielson was fighting for that one title back in WrestleMania 30. I think that was a case where they had one championship. And so, yeah, like there is a track record where it can work. It's just, it's just very difficult right now with WWE.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to get into the ins and outs of Survivor Series, but it's kind of sad how it's fallen. The thing with Survivor Series is, and even with this Big E Roman Reigns feud, like they're gonna do this match on Sunday. I don't know who, I don't think it's likely that Big E beats Roman Reigns. And so like you're going to have Roman, you might have Roman beat Big E, which I wouldn't do, again, for all of the reasons we mentioned here, that Big E is struggling to establish himself as a top guy, and he's seen as subversive to Roman Reigns. And if he loses, he'll be exactly like that, the B champion behind the real top star.
Yeah, obviously, ideally you want a time limit draw, but WWE doesn't do that.
Well, they'll do it. The Rossos will run in and get a DQ. That would probably be the way to best protect Big E. Here's what I would have done. I would have done a Survivor Series match where you had the 5 members of the New Day and the 5 members of, you could get the Bloodline and 2 other heels or whatever, and you do a traditional Survivor Series match where these guys fight for their respective groups, and you wouldn't have to, you could do a cleaner finish in that way, where you could have like all 4 guys left against Roman Reigns and they just beat up Roman Reigns and win, or vice versa, 4 guys left against Big E and they beat up Big E and win. You could protect guys way more in that kind of scenario. It just seems like, I don't know, an unnecessary match to have, but because the idea for Survivor Series is the 2 world champions got to fight each other, that's just kind of what they're doing. And I think it's counterproductive to the world title picture in general, that you have 2 champions and that you like book yourself into a situation where you have to have one of them presumably lose once a year to the other. kind of creates a dynamic where one's always going to be below the other, which is what happens.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And, I don't know if you have anything else to say about the WWE championships, but
no, we can move on.
Yeah, in a case where there's more than 2 championships, and presumably in New Japan, you have Okada, who he's a G1 winner, but he's carrying around that V4 belts to signify his G1 win. However, at the same time, he is not acknowledging Shingo Takagi as the real IWGP World Champion. He still thinks Ibushi is the champion since he's the last champion before they introduced this new belt. And of course, Ospreay, he is going out saying he never got pinned for that title. He had to vacate it for for injury, and so he thinks he's the world champion. And it's created this whole dynamic with Wrestle Kingdom, especially now it's 3 nights of Wrestle Kingdom, and so it's very strange. It's very confusing. I mean, I don't know. At the same time, I'm kind of intrigued, Jesse, about all this. It's kind of made it interesting of like who's actually going to go out of Wrestle Kingdom as champion. I don't know what you see about this whole world title situation.
For me, the big thing that I don't like about it. Now, I agree with you. It's intriguing. I think the angle of Ospreay having never lost a title and wanting, parading around America as the real champion. I think that's a good angle. I think it fits his character. I think it sets up an intriguing match. And so I think in that regard, there are some benefits to it. I'm just kind of over we have to fabricate some way for us to have multiple world title matches because we have multiple nights of the Tokyo Dome. I just find that booking pattern to be pretty played out at this point. It was fine the first time. And I mean, New Japan, I just don't know what they're doing with their championships. I mean, they did the whole thing where they stopped the lineage of the IWGP World Championship and created the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship, or maybe it's vice versa. I can't even remember which one stopped and which one started. It just seems like they've totally made everything way more confusing than it needs to be. And while I am intrigued by the Ospreay stuff, and I'm just, look, we're going to get great wrestling matches at Wrestle Kingdom. When Ospreay, Takagi, and Okada are the main participants involved, we know we're going to get off the charts wrestling. That's no brainer. But it does seem unnecessarily convoluted, and it seems to be done because they're like, oh, how do we get multiple world championship matches, during Wrestle Kingdom? Oh, we're going to have to come up with a 2-day tournament or some sort of minimal thing to do. And it just seems like unnecessary clutter for New Japan. And it's confusing. It's confusing to me. And Okada's explanation is well, I don't recognize Shingo as the world champion. Ibushi is still the world champion. And since I beat Ibushi in the G1 finals, I'm the now world champion. And it's just so strange and weird and very unlike New Japan, which is a very straightforward organization that tells long stories and stuff like this, and stories that have a lot of twists and turns, but they're not always so confusing. This feels like a crazy thing I'm reading about in the end of Death of WCW, where I'm like, oh, I can't believe Vince Russo thought this idea would work. It really is what it sounds like. I mean, it's way better talent, but that's kind of what it feels like. It's just this crazy nonsense. There's 3 world champions. There's 4 world champions. No one knows who the actual world champion is. It's just so strange.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't really optimism that it would change this whole convoluted booking, because obviously they're able to do good business, at least good enough business in the Tokyo Dome, and then they'll keep doing that. But it just seems ideal that you would have your other championships main events one of the other nights. You have the junior heavyweight championship, which they seem pretty confident in some of their champions, especially Hiromu. I think he could main events a night in of himself. You have the US heavyweight championship, which as of late they put it on pretty big names, which could main events of Tokyo Dome, especially somebody like Kenta. I think he can make an event at Tokyo Dome, especially if you feuded Tanahashi again.
Yeah, I would and it's they can do this. They've done it before. So you can create a storyline that is over and big and feels really important that doesn't involve the world championship. And New Japan's always kind of been like this as far as I've been watching it, where their big singles matches are very championship oriented. Like, okay, what are our big singles matches? Well, one's going to be for the IWGP World Championship. One's going to be for the Intercontinental Championship. One's going to be for the Never title. One's going to be for the Junior Heavyweight Championship. One is going to be for Yano's King of Pro Wrestling like trophy. Like, they always are built around. They rarely have just, you know, these big singles matches. Like they've been able, like the Jericho Omega match was one where it's just like, this is a really big singles match. They're not going to wrestle for the championship. They're just two guys who don't like each other and they're going to fight. I think
I think that was for the US title though.
Oh, it was for the, see, I don't even remember that. See,
yeah,
no, you're right. The US championship, the championship I forgot. Like, I know, but you know what I mean? Like, it does seem like they're always beholden to that. And I don't think there was the situation, you know, it's almost 10 years ago now, where, you know, Naito won the G1 and Naito was supposed to challenge Okada for the world championship. And they, you know, they had Nakamura versus Tanahashi for the Intercontinental Championship. And Nakamura and Tanahashi was just a hotter program. And they let the fans vote. What do you think should be the main event? And they voted for the Intercontinental Championship, which really hurt the image of the world championship. And that was seen as this like beta title that people weren't as interested in. So I think they're kind of afraid of that in the sense that we have to make the world championship feel important. We don't want to have another night at the Tokyo Dome that's the world championship is not defended, or they don't have the confidence in anything but the world championship. I'm not really sure what the dynamic is there, but it does seem like a lot. Like, are we going to get 3? Because there's 3 nights of Wrestle Kingdom now. You got like this, you have like literally WrestleMania, like they had WrestleMania Backlash this year. We have Wrestle Kingdom Backlash. It's Wrestle Kingdom Night 3. It's in a much smaller building. Like, it's just a weird, strange dynamic this year. I don't know what they're doing. And I don't particularly, even though I like some of like the Ospreay stuff, and I even like Okada just tooling around and having like this midlife crisis where he's like, I'm really the world champion. Everyone's like, no, it's okay, Grandpa. You're not the world champion. Shingo is. It's like, oh, I got the title belt. It's just a very strange dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of talked about this before in our G1 episode, where like Okada has just reached a pinnacle in his career, but he's still so young that you have to find ways to like keep him hot and so sort of make unique storylines out of him. But yeah, like it's like way too unique for my liking. Like when winning the G1, that's fine. Like, yeah, I mean, you would expect him to, you know, to accomplish that, but to have this sort of delusional aspect, which at the same time is sort of what fan sentiment kind of is. Like, a lot of fans still don't like the World Heavyweight Championship, the one that Shingo and Ospreay have, you know, especially like the whole lineage part. For me, that's a big thing. Like, they got rid of the lineage of the heavyweight belts and just have a new World Heavyweight lineage. And so I think from an ace standpoint, for Okada as ace, he still keeps that because he's sort of exuding fan sentiment in a weird sort of way. And so that's the kind of the weird thing with New Japan. Like, it's very confusing. At times I don't like it, especially for the future aspects, like what's going to happen after Wrestle Kingdom, and what's the fallout from all of this. But at the same time, it's very intriguing to think about of what's going to happen. You know, what's that third matchup? Is it Ibushi versus like Ospreay, perhaps, for, you know, for all the marbles for the whole the World Heavyweight Championship? That could be it. Maybe not. You know, it's just so many things to think about.
Yeah, it's all very strange. And it's one of those things where, and when it comes to like their championships, I do feel like New Japan has been very heavy, and then sometimes have really struggled with what people are worried about, what AEW is going to do with Page winning the championship, and what is he going to be like as champion? Because New Japan has at times been all about the journey, and once someone is the champion, their championship reign kind of is forgettable. Ibushi being a prime example of someone who I think had a forgettable championship reign after it was, you know, teased and promoted for years and years, and fans wanted to see it. And once he got the championship, it was kind of a meh reign that people didn't really care about. Kenny Omega's, you know, championship reign got a lot of criticism for, you know, they had the triple threat match and he feuded with Cody Rhodes. And, you know, after that long multi-year journey, his world title reign really wasn't that much. It's almost like when someone wins the world title, New Japan's like, all right, your story is done. We got to focus on our current, whoever the current loser is to get them ready to go, like Naito or Omega or Ospreay, I think is perhaps falling down that thing where it's like he won the world title, then he loses it, and then he's going to spend years trying to get it back, and he's a heel now, and maybe he'll be a babyface when he finally wins it again in like a year or two. It just they don't always have the best title reigns, and Okada had great title reigns, and I think Shingo, it's so hard because he's doing the clap crowds and he doesn't have the kind of support that he normally would have, and now he's kind of like Big E in the sense that he's kind of being big timed by the real stars like Okada, who's out here basically saying like, I don't respect you, Shingo, like go screw, you're not the real world champion to me. And I know it's a work and it's supposed to get Shingo mad and stuff like that. And it'll probably work in that dynamic, but it does kind of tell the story of, it's like Okada, who everyone believes is a bigger star than Shingo, whether or not he has the title or not, just how it is and how long Okada had been established in New Japan as the top guy, that it does kind of make him feel like he's an inferior champion because you got the real top star kind of, making him look like a beta and, slapping him around. And hopefully I think in that way, Shingo like needs to beat Okada at Wrestle Kingdom because he's been the one that's been the most disrespected, but I don't know if that's their plan. And I think maybe Shingo could have been more seen as a temporary champion, and this is his ceiling and they don't care to elevate him any further. And he's probably gotten a lot further in New Japan than anyone ever thought he would when he first showed up, as good as he was. I don't think that the dynamic has really helped him like stand out as like this top champion, even though he's been winning his matches. He's winning his title defenses. He's looking dominant. He's looking very physical and strong and all of that you would want on paper your champion to doing. But I do think it's a dangerous dynamic that they're kind of risking with Shingo by making him look weak by having all these other people basically saying you're not a real champion. And one of them is like your biggest baby face, which is Okada.
Yeah, I mean, you're one of your best champions of all time in Okada. And yeah, I mean, for New Japan, I guess it's kind of like an MMA sort of approach with their championships. It's just more about match quality rather than just the journey of itself. Like look at Kamaru Usman comes to mind. Like I don't think anyone considers him a standout UFC champion, but his fights have been pretty entertaining. From especially his last fight with Kobe Covington, and so maybe that's the approach there, especially with Shingo. With Shingo, like he isn't really going to like wow you with his like promos and all that. I mean, he's not a bad promo by any means. Like he's obviously a very entertaining personality, but obviously with New Japan, his selling point is the match quality, and he's put on fantastic matches, especially in the G1 as of late. And so maybe that's what they're banking on. Whether he, like you said, like maybe like for the difference between Shingo and Big E, like Shingo can obviously pull it off, the big match quality, especially for a guy like Okada. And so again, maybe that's the approach there. I agree with you. It doesn't really seem like they want. Well, yes, I don't know. Shingo and Ospreay had their rivalry this year, and the arguably match of the year with some of their matches. And so maybe they could do Shingo wins night 1 and then goes on to face Ospreay night 2. But even then, like I don't know if he's going to be Ospreay. Like New Japan's obviously very high on Ospreay as well, and he's more of their homegrown kind of guy than Shingo. Obviously, Shingo be from Dragon Gate, and so I don't know with that either. I mean, there's just so many things, which again, like you said at the top, that makes it very intriguing of what's going to happen. And we're in the midst of Best of Super Juniors and World Tag League, and so they're not really pumping up the world title scene anytime soon, but maybe next month, when you get to the Road to Wrestle Kingdom stuff, maybe that's when they can heat up some things there between Shingo and, with Japan right now with COVID. Like, I think the latest news is that you only need to wait 3 days if you're fully vaxxed for foreign nationals or just for foreigners for quarantine. And so maybe you could get guys like Ospreay into Japan, just for the whole bill. It's not just for Wrestle Kingdom, just for a whole month of Ospreay in Japan to really build up this world title match, to really, get things more clarity on the whole situation, of more clarity of where things could possibly go.
Yeah, I think it's almost like kind of like the way we feel like the world title is being treated is almost like more of a, we artistically or stylistically disagree with kind of what they're doing, but from a functioning standpoint, it does make Wrestle Kingdom really interesting. Like it does. Like, and I don't like the idea that they keep having to shoehorn ideas into making this like a multi-night event so they can have multiple world championship matches on the same weekend, but it does create an interesting dynamic. And when I'm watching Wrestle Kingdom, I'm going to be more excited because I know that there's more possibilities between who's going to end up with the world championship at the end. And it's not just going to be one of 2 people. It could be one of 4 people, one of 5 people, one of 6 people, whoever's, whoever's involved in it. And that is successful. And it was proven to be successful back when they could draw full houses and stuff like that. So it's almost like, on one end, I'm like, I'm going to be intrigued by it. We're going to be interested in seeing what's happening, even if we can be like, I kind of wish they didn't do it. And so it is an interesting dynamic in that sense that I think we're more like puritanical about like how we think the world championship should be treated, even though we're admitting that this is like a lot of fun watching. It's kind of like saying like, I wish in basketball that they work the ball inside more because that's the fundamental aspects of the game. And I like that, even though we're all like, oh my God, I can't believe this shooting so many threes. The guy's so good. Like, it's kind of like that sense where we know that we kind of want something that's classier than what we ultimately end up getting.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the promoting side, right? Like I'm sure for like guys like Geto, Jado, and even Dick Togo, like they're thinking about how to promote these Wrestle Kingdom shows because they want to fill up the whole Wrestle Kingdom because obviously we see in the past dome shows like the lack of crowd that they're not allowed to have, it looks very bleak. With not a packed dome show. And so they really want to try to fill up the Tokyo Dome, but especially for 3 nights. Well, actually not for 2 nights.
Yeah, the 2 nights. Super Arena.
Yeah, then look at the Super Arena on the 3rd night, but still you have to fill that up too. And so that's obviously their goal there. And so I think for a promoting standpoint, it makes sense why they're doing this. But yeah, like you said, from a traditional standpoint, it's not really the best for what we want for the world title. But yeah, from a promoter side, it makes a lot of sense, especially with COVID. I think things are looking good in Japan, but I think the government's just very conservative and they just don't want another outbreak. And so I think that's why they're being very conservative about, wanting to pack a lot of people, have a lot of noise within their buildings. I think they just really want to be cautious and maybe too overly cautious. That's another discussion, but I think that's what they're trying to deal with right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's every discussion we have about New Japan comes down to that the atmosphere in the country is bad for wrestling, but the crowd's not allowed to make noise. And there are many things that we'd probably feel different about if we understood what the true crowd reaction was like for these things. I mean, imagine if in AEW, there were still in empty arenas or whatever, we would have literally no idea how over Hangman Page is. And the discussion about him could be completely different. Like we could be having a discussion and be like, do you think this guy's over? Because we're not seeing like, he's not doing like gigantic quarters ratings or anything like that. Or like, we would all just be kind of being like, oh, Twitter seems to think he's over, but is he really over? Or the crowd, like, but because we know the crowds are going crazy for him, we're like, oh yeah, it makes sense to put the title on Hangman Page. He's really over. And, we don't understand that with whether it's Shingo, whether it's Evil, whether it's Ospreay, whether it's this new grumpy Okada. We're not really sure what really is over with the fan base. And that really makes it difficult to analyze things. And I think that hopefully, like you said, I think Japan is the most heavily vaccinated country now based on a minimum amount of people in the country. I think probably a small European country is probably the most vaccinated country. But I think, Japan, I think I read it was something like 77 or 78% of the people there. I think there was a day where Tokyo had 0, positive COVID tests. Yep. That's like 30 million people. So, they have, they're doing a better job at mitigating the spread of COVID-19. They were really slow, the vaccination rollout, but once it did get rolled out, it's obviously been very successful relative to the rest of the world. So, I'll be love. You said that, if the quarantine goes down to 3 days for foreigners, that opens up opportunities for Ospreay, but it also creates opportunities for AEW guys like Bryan Danielson, or, I'm sure Moxley would be over there if he is able to come back to wrestling, which I suspect he will be. but obviously nothing's a given. Is Kenny Omega going to come back? Are the Young Bucks going to come back? There's a lot more opportunities there for New Japan, and you could have intriguing title matches, especially if, like, depending on what they're doing currently, you could bring in Jericho and have him, like, Jericho can do a job in New Japan, no problem. Like, at this point in his career, I feel like, he's been phased down a little bit in AEW as far as the dominant champion for us, but there's a lot going on. Are there any other world titles that you want to talk about that we didn't get to?
I'll just add one last thing. The AEW title has technically been defended at Wrestle Kingdom with Jericho and Tanahashi, and so if they wanted to steam up Hangman Page, maybe have him defend the AEW title against someone in New Japan for Wrestle Kingdom. I don't know, why not?
Wait, was Tanahashi versus Jericho for the AEW World Championship?
I don't know about officially, but technically speaking, I remember Kevin Kelly on commentary was kind of hinting that, like, Tanahashi could have won the title if he actually won the match.
Is that true? I completely forgot about that.
I remember that was kind of a thing. I don't know if it was officially a thing, but, like, the commentators were kind of hinting that, like, hey, Tanahashi could be champion technically if he won.
Look, the New Japan and AEW relationship is much stronger than it was a few years ago. Ishii was just on Dynamite this week. I'd be pretty surprised if Okada doesn't appear on AEW television at some point while he's in the United States. If he doesn't, I would see that almost as a red flag about, New Japan and AEW's relationship. But it seems likely, since they mentioned Okada like 500 times during commentary, that and they've been teasing, like, Chaos being a part of Japan or AEW, and Best Friends are now in Chaos, even though they were, like, already in Chaos. I love that bit.
Oh, it's great.
We're like Chuck Taylor was like, I was already in Chaos. I have the banner and everything. It's like Rocky's, like, re-inviting them back in.
I will say this. On Wikipedia, it says for Wrestle Kingdom 14. Had Tanahashi won, he would have received a match for Jericho's AEW World Championship. So it wasn't for the title, but he would have received a title match if he won.
Honestly, it's starting to ring a bell. Did they, like, do that independently? Like Jericho said, like, if you beat me, I'll give you a match. It seemed like something that wasn't, like, it wasn't like on Dynamite they were like, and Chris Jericho defends the AEW champion, Hiroshi Tanahashi gets a thing. Because you're right, I do kind of remember that now, where they were just like, well, what are they going to do? We're like two guys that just aren't going to get in trouble for that kind of shit. So all right, but thanks a lot, everyone, for listening and joining in on the conversation. Thank you, Jason, as always. We're going to be back in 2 weeks. I will have completed my Black Friday shopping at that point, because I was organized the whole schedule around Black Friday, not recording on Black Friday, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. We've got a couple of ideas. We have had an idea on the back burner we might use. It's also coming up towards the end of the year. So we can do awards. We can go over the Wrestling Observer newsletter awards. We can go over our personal awards. I can make up a bunch of fake categories that we can vote on. That sounds like a lot of work. I might not do that, but it just came into my head. But thanks a lot, everybody. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks.